All right. Good. People showing up. Another minute and a half. Time for them to get back. Good. All right, so back at, so I'm going to talk about Project 7, which you've probably already done. It's due tonight, but there's stuff here to talk about for sort of background. So Project 7 is Bitcoin, where you set up a private Bitcoin blockchain to play with. So the real public blockchain is right here at blockchain.info. You can view it there. You can watch things get mined. You can see the transactions. And this is one of the huge problems with Bitcoin. Nothing is private. So it would be illegal to use it for almost all normal banking purposes. But anyway, somebody, to make a tutorial, actually spent some real money to make some transactions. So this is a transaction made by somebody he calls Alice. So you can just retrieve it with curl, and this will get the active money in that account. One thing to mention is Bitcoin accounts have these ridiculous long hashes, and these hashes look like base 64, but that is base 64, but this is not base 64. That is actually base 58, which is nuts. They've actually taken 58 and 58 squared and 58 cubed because they took base 64 and they removed the characters that are confusing. Like a capital O looks like a 0 and a lowercase l looks like a 1. So they removed the ones that you could make mistakes with. So now you have something you could write down and fax and read over the telephone, and people are unlikely to make mistakes. So they got down to 58 characters and created this bizarre base 58 stuff. So anyway, that's what an account is. So to see what's in here, you have an unspent output. So she has 845, 8,450,000 Satoshis. Because Satoshis are some tiny fraction, I think 10 to the minus 8 Bitcoins. It's a quantized currency, like dollars only go down to pennies. It goes down to these Satoshis. And that's a good idea because one Bitcoin is now like 5,000 bucks. So spending a small fraction of a Bitcoin makes more and more sense. So she has this amount left, and then there's information about the various transactions she's done here. So, you know, if you were using Bitcoin, anybody can go see what you've done. And if you look at the crypto locker malware, one popular thing people do is people get infected, and then an analyst will take it and find the Bitcoin key and then watch to see what happens to the money. And you can see how much money they made. You can see when they withdrew it. You can see where they set it. So if you actually want to be anonymous on Bitcoin, you have to put in a bunch of fake accounts and shuffle the money around among them. And it's really not perfect at all. And that's why there are later forms. I think Zcash makes a big deal out of cryptographically protecting your identity. But Bitcoin doesn't really. The real name isn't there anywhere, but the financial history of the whole thing is available for anybody to analyze.
Yeah. They use either big exchanges or Bitcoin mixers. So Bitcoin mixers most likely to be used for like criminal purpose.
Yeah.
Because to track it back requires like enormous effort. They would split one Bitcoin in like a lot of Satoshis and then just do like 20 or 30 transactions between like main wallets.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, the Bitcoin mixer is just sort of like the Tor network,
Yeah.
where you bounce it around among many machines, and that means, but unlike the Tor network, it's all public. So in principle, you could untangle it all.
It just takes
Yeah.
a lot more effort.
So, I mean, real money laundering, you have to take it out of the system and put it in something else and then put it back in. But Bitcoin is commonly used for money laundering, and that's why, that's why it's worth so much. So people can do illegal things. That's the main reason it exists. And it turns out to be a huge demand for illegal transactions, and that makes the price get very high. So anyway, that's what you have here. Here's the, there are 100 million Satoshis in a Bitcoin. So Alice has 2 unspent outputs, one worth this much and one worth that much. So if you do a transaction, Alice decides to give money to Bob. Every transaction has 1 input and 2 outputs. You send the money to Bob, and then you have money left over, and that goes here. And not only that, if you actually want this to work, you have to make it so the 2 outputs add up to less than the input, so the money vanishes, and that's the tip for the miner. And typically, the current tip is about $3. If you don't pay the miner $3, they will not mine your transaction, and it will not really happen. So that's the game there. So, and by the way, even if a block is mined, in principle, there could be someone else that mined a different block that is later determined to be the winner. So it's not considered irrevocable until 6 blocks have been mined on top of it. So that's why any Bitcoin transaction is not actually considered complete for 1 hour. The difficulty of the network is constantly adjusted so that it always takes about 10 minutes to mine each block. So it is always approximately an hour for 6 blocks to be mined. And so in principle, if you were to buy anything with Bitcoin, you really ought to wait an hour before giving them the product. But in practice, most of the time it goes through, and so for small transactions, you can probably just treat it like a credit card and it'll be all right. Now the block size, as you can see, hit a maximum and pretty much saturated here. This is a big problem. This is the number of transactions in a block. Each transaction has a certain size, and as you can see, about a year ago, it hit a maximum and quit growing. This was the block size disaster. Bitcoin originally had no limit on the block size. And then there was a denial of service attack where you do ridiculous amounts of tiny transactions just to fill up the block, which would freeze the miners. So to prevent that, the original author, Satoshi Nakamoto, put a 1 megabyte block size limit. And immediately people said, if it grows, you'll need to increase that limit. And he said, yeah, we'll worry about that later. And then he quit and vanished. So the community now has to vote and agree on stuff, and they're not too good at voting and agreeing on stuff. So a lot of people, like the IPv6 people, said there's a disaster coming, we ought to do something. And the miners said, just shut up. We're going to leave it the way it is. And on it went. And so Bitcoin finally forked last month. August 1 had the big fork over this issue. There are 2 solutions. One is called segregated witness, where you take some of the data out of each transaction and put it off the blockchain to make the transaction smaller, to fit more of them on the chain. The other one is to make the chain bigger, 2 megabyte blocks. Or 8 megabyte blocks, different theories. And the 2 people who couldn't agree on this split Bitcoin, and now there are 2 Bitcoins, Bitcoin Classic and Bitcoin New or something. Bitcoin Cash. And the other, yeah, there's 2 of them. One's the original and one's modified to have one of these solutions. And that means, by the way, that you can have a bunch of double spending attacks because both chains are mathematically identical to a certain point. And after that, they go separately. So you have the same private keys, the same amount of money. So now everybody that had like some Bitcoins suddenly has 2. You now have Bitcoin of one type and Bitcoin of the other type, mathematically identical. And your wallet software probably doesn't know that. So you can do something like spend it on one chain and have it counted on the other chain and stuff like that. There's a various chaos that can happen out of this. That's why a lot of exchanges and people that hold your money will choose one or the other and warn you, we're not going to support the other for a while. So that's why I want to get to these news articles, because it's about to happen again. This is going to be the Byzantium fork. There's going to be another fork. Now, what happened before was, I think, what they call a soft fork, where you forked and both chains survived, and now you have 2 cryptocurrencies. The belief was that this would be terrible and would destroy Bitcoin totally, and everyone worked really hard to avoid it. But now it happened, and it doesn't seem to have destroyed interest in Bitcoin. In fact, it's higher than ever, so maybe it's all right. But this is what's supposed to be a hard fork. They're going to declare an update to add new features, and they're going to tell everybody to mine this one and quit mining the old one. And only the idiots that don't update will still be on the old one. Now, what happens is, if everybody does go to the new one, that's a hard fork. One chain ends, and there are 2 branches, but one branch stops and one branch goes ahead. But if some people keep mining the old one, It's out there, and you can start trading it, and some fool might be willing to pay money for it. And that's what happened to Ethereum. It could happen to Bitcoin, that the old one continues, and now you have like more versions. And there's another hard fork coming up. So they warn you here, a hard fork is coming up. This is Ethereum going to have this hard fork, but I think Bitcoin's also going to have a hard fork coming up. Anyway, so Ethereum is going to split. Ethereum has already split once. There's two versions of Ethereum, Ethereum Classic and the new Ethereum, and it's going to split again. And I don't know if both chains are going to split or just one. And then there's another split coming after that. So these things are sort of multiplying. Oh, it's Ethereum coming, pardon me. Ethereum's having to have its hard fork. Anyway, we'll see, adding more features. So various people warn you here what you have to do. Bitcoin, so here's the Bitcoin. It's going to fork so they can make an ASIC resistant version of Bitcoin. And this is what I've been talking about all along. The original point of Bitcoin was to make it impossible for anyone to control it. So it would be like gold. It would be money, and no government could devalue it or print more or just dump a bunch out like they did in TARP. Nobody could do that because it would be controlled by the whole world. And it totally failed. Because they designed the hashing routine so it depends entirely on CPU speed, the place with the fastest, cheapest CPU speed won, and that is China, and nobody else gets to say anything. 99% of all the mining is done by 10 people in China. They completely control Bitcoin, so it might as well be the US government or the yen or the Bank of America. It's totally controlled by one central body. They have not achieved their political goal. So they want to fix that now by changing the mining to ASIC resistant version of Bitcoin. ASICs are these special chips designed just to do this processing as fast as possible. And in China, they just have giant server farms with racks and racks of machines all full of these ASICs. And that's what they're running with free power they get by bribing the electric company and free cooling or the waterfalls. And they're running like crazy, mining all the Bitcoins there. And if they switch to this version, it's going to totally hose all those miners in China. They've got millions of dollars of investment that's going to suddenly become worthless. And that's why they've been resisting change all along. Don't rock the boat. It's working fine right now for them. But anyway, they're planning to fork the Bitcoin Gold project. And that one will be a hard fork, they say. And then that one will no longer be dominated by whoever has the fastest CPU. It'll use a different algorithm that will hopefully spread it all over the world. So we'll see what happens. And here's the other one, segregated witness. That's another hard fork, which is also supposed to happen, where you move some of the data off the chain. So there's going to be a lot of flavors of Bitcoin pretty soon. And if the past is any guide, they're not really going to be hard forks. They're going to just have each branch continue and be spent in the marketplace and be mined. So it's just going to multiply the chaos, but there are already hundreds of cryptocurrencies. So I guess there's room for 10 kinds of Bitcoin. Yeah.
What happens if there's not enough miners in the situation? Because right now it's clear to them what they need to invest or spend to mine Bitcoin. But
well, as long as there's even, the question is, what if there aren't enough miners? If there's even one miner, that's enough. Because what happens is it adjusts the difficulty to match the, so if there's only one miner, if there used to be 1,000 miners, and there's a fork and now there's only one, then the next block will take a long time to mine. But the network will notice that and lower the difficulty. That's why it tends not to die, because when the original fork happened in Ethereum, they had the main Ethereum and the other one, which had been hacked and had all kinds of problems, and 99% of everyone went to the new one. So the old one suddenly became much easier to mine, and even though it was selling for a much lower price, it was actually more profitable to mine the old one. So that's the problem. You know, you create this like penny stocks. You have these cheap stocks, but they're not exactly worthless. And if they're cheap enough, they become a good investment again. So that's the madness of it all. And Putin has apparently now ordered that they are going to make the crypto ruble, which is almost certainly going to be based on Ethereum. They've been working on Ethereum a lot in Russia. Ethereum is the #2 cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is the largest, and Ethereum is #2. And for a while, Ethereum was threatening to actually exceed Bitcoin and might have now Bitcoin's in the front again in total capitalization. The total capitalization of all cryptocurrencies is pathetic, like $12 billion, which is absolutely nothing, like not even 1% of Visa and MasterCard or anything. All this, serious financial professionals are just laughing at all this. These are just little children playing with their marbles, trading pennies back and forth, pretending to be a bank when they don't even know what they're doing. But they are all beginning to develop blockchain-based financial transaction models based on Bitcoin, because they're going to make something out of it that'll be professional. It will not be run by random people. It will not be distributed around the world. It will be controlled by one bank or government. So only they can mine it, and then you can keep it secret, and then you can have taxes and reporting and everything you need to have for real currency. So, but the Bitcoin caught their attention as having some good ideas that are worth imitating, but certainly not running in its current state. So anyway, here you make your own. This is what everybody does to make their cryptocurrency. They just clone the Bitcoin source code and then modify it a little and call it a new currency. So you can make one. So here you make Bitcoin. There's a thing called Regtest, which is designed to be used to test your Bitcoins. So you to make your Bitcoin, all you have to do is install some background stuff that Ubuntu is going to need. Start with an Ubuntu server. Then you download this thing called the Berkeley database. I don't know why, but that's what it uses. And you have to compile your Berkeley database. Then you get the source code for Bitcoin from Git. Now, when you do this, let me just do some of this stuff. This was pretty annoying. So you git clone Bitcoin, and off it goes, getting the entire library, the directory of all the versions of Bitcoin that are up there. And like a proper Git project, they never throw anything away. Every version is still up there in case somebody might want it. There's a newer version they recommend, but you can always get the old version. That's the way a proper open source project should be. So that if you're curious, you want to find out how something was done before, you can find out. So this will get me the library of them. And now to see the versions, I do cd bitcoin git tag. All right, now I get a list of all the versions, and it looks like 0.9.5 RC2 is the latest version. And this is a cruel joke because I don't know who made this system, but it really is the official numbering system that 0.10 comes after 0.9 and is bigger. And 0.11 is bigger than 0.10 and 0.9. But the sorting engine doesn't know that. So here's the latest versions up here. So that's pretty cruel and annoying. Now, the RC means release candidate. So those are like betas. So I don't recommend using them. I would stick with the last stable version, which is that one, 0.15.01. Although for this project, probably any of them would do above like 9 or so. So now to get the particular version, you do git checkout to do that. So you check out that version, you run the autogen configure, then you make it, which takes 20 minutes and 2 gigs of RAM because compiling it is big. It's big. And when you're done, you'll have Bitcoin. You'll have 2 things, Bitcoin D and Bitcoin CLI. And I should have them. Maybe not. Anyway, maybe not on this machine. Anyway, then you make a configuration file. And this is, okay, you can control Bitcoin in several ways. And all other cryptocurrencies very, very much imitate Bitcoin. So it's good to understand Bitcoin. All the rest are very small moderate variations on the Bitcoin. So that there's this thing called Bitcoin CLI that lets you execute command line commands to control your Bitcoin blockchain. But most people don't do that. What they use is the RPCs, remote procedure calls, because you can control them from a browser. And you can make a web page with buttons you click on that do things to the blockchain. And that's, of course, a much friendlier user experience. So you create this Bitcoin configuration file, and it has an RPC user and password. And every command that you specify with a curl command, which is a web request, has to have this name and password in it. So after you've done that, then you start the daemon, Regtest daemon, and it will be running in the background like Apache. And now listening on 18.444, it's listening to get Bitcoin commands. And now you can use Bitcoin CLI -Regtest tells it I'm using my own test chain, not the real Bitcoin chain. It costs real money. And then I can get blockchain info, and you'll see that there are 0 blocks so far because you haven't started mining yet. So you can't, no transactions are happening, no blocks are being mined. You have created the software and the data structures, but they're just sitting there empty. You can look at your wallet, and your wallet has 0 Bitcoins in it because you haven't put any money in. So here's one thing that's good is to encrypt your wallet so that if somebody was to steal your hard drive or your laptop, they wouldn't get your Bitcoin. So you can encrypt it with a password, and then you can unlock it for a period of time here. This will unlock it for 360 seconds. That's how you use it. From now on, you'll have to, this is a good habit if you have real Bitcoin wallets with real money in them, is to encrypt them and only unlock them when you're using them. Then you can also make a backup and restore your wallet, and the backup is also encrypted. And of course, you need to do this because if they steal your laptop and just throw it away, you've lost your Bitcoins too, unless you have the private keys. Every Bitcoin is public key encryption. You have a private key and a public key. And you spend it with the public key, but you own it with the private key. So if you lose your private key, those Bitcoins are destroyed. And almost, I think, 10% of all the Bitcoins in the world have in fact been destroyed this way. People have lost them or stolen until a lot of them have been lost. Of course, the same thing's true of gold. People dig up gold, put it in rings, and after a while somebody throws it away, and some of the gold is just lost where you're never going to find it again. So you can put it in a human-readable file, and then you'll see information about your wallet. And so now to spend or receive any money, you have to have an address. So you run this Bitcoin CLI and you get an address. And this is, you get a random number in this ridiculous base 58 stuff. So that's your address, this long mess. Now you can start mining a block. So this will generate one block. And now when you do get blockchain info, now there is one block. Okay, you can list transactions. Because you mined a block, you get a reward. Every time you mine a block, you get paid. In the original Bitcoin, it was 50 Bitcoins you got for mining a block for the first 4 years, and every 4 years thereafter, it cuts in half. It was 50, then 25, now it's currently 12 and a half, because Bitcoin is only a little over 8 years old. So you get your balance, and now you have 0, even though you mined and got 50, because even though you have a transaction putting 50 in your account, you don't really have the money until it's considered finalized. For the real Bitcoin blockchain, that requires 6 blocks piled on top of it. For the Regtest blockchain, they require 100 blocks piled on top of it. So you have to mine 100 more blocks to really get the money from your first block. And by the way, that means you've got 100 more payments of 50 coming in as you mine more blocks. So your balance is going to go up fast. So you mine 100 more blocks, and now you finally have 101 blocks in the blockchain and 50 in your wallet, because one of the transactions has now matured and actually become spendable by you. So now you can view your unspent Bitcoins, and I think that's it. I didn't do any transactions or anything on this one. I'm planning to put one up on my server again. I had one up on my server and people would join my blockchain, but what happened is I had it running all the time. So it's mining every 10 minutes, always with nothing in the block, but it got up to like 50 gigabytes of crap on the server, or 20 gigabytes or something, because it gets big. And then when students would connect, it would take all day for it to synchronize. So I'm going to have to make, my plan is I'm going to put up a server and I'm going to have a button you have to click to mine some blocks. And it's not going to mine except when you click the button. So it won't just mine thousands and millions of useless empty blocks. You'll do a project where you connect to it and go to a faucet and get some money, and then click a button to mine some blocks. So yeah.
Well, it takes like 50 gigabytes. How do they embed it in like websites?
What's that?
I read somewhere that like instead of adware, people are just putting Bitcoin miners on websites.
Yes.
So how does it work with the website?
Yes, that was in the news today. They're putting cryptocurrency miners on a website. So when you go there, you're infected, your CPU gets high. They're not Bitcoins though. You'll never get Bitcoins there. It's one of the other currencies. I think Monero.
Yeah.
It has to be one of the others, which is not just a race for the high CPU, or you never win. But there are others where just any amount of CPU time will get your reward. Yeah, I've heard about that. Some big site has Monero infection right now.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
Yeah, it's a way to make money. A lot of botnets do it too.
Yeah, some of them are actually infected websites, but some websites are willing to use it instead of adware.
Oh, good. All right. All right. I don't think this stuff will appear on the screen. Someone's identifying themselves as Joker. All right. Anyway, so all right. It may appear on the screen. I think this does not appear on their broadcasted screen, no, but you can see it in this room, I think. Maybe not. You can see it in this room. All right. So there's a certain amount of confidentiality lost in this system. All right. The other thing I wanted to show you was multi-chain. The multi-chain is a derivative of Bitcoin that I highly recommend, and some of the big banks are in fact working with multi-chain. Oh, good. Thank you. Okay, gotcha. Make a note of this. Joker. Okay, I'm going to save that. All right. So here's how multi-chain works. It's very nice. You just get this stuff. Untart, and by the way, now there are Mac and Windows versions. So you could actually do this on Mac or Windows. When I wrote this project first about a year ago, they only had a Linux 64-bit version. That's all there was. Now they got Mac and Windows versions, which I have not tried using, but I bet they're easier. But I stuck with this one because my project is all ready to go, Well, I just had to do a few updates, like the version here changed. So once you put on Multichain, you download this thing, unzip it. You do not have to compile it. It's pre-compiled for your operating system. Then you can create a chain. So you create a chain. You have to have 2 servers to do it on, and I've got 2 here. There. And by the way, I should mention, in case anybody doesn't know, when you install an Ubuntu server, it's headless, which is like a cloud machine. This is something to get used to. You don't type commands in here or you will go out of your mind. You don't have windows. You can't scroll back. You can't copy and paste any more than you can with a headless machine that's in New York City. You just put on SSH and you SSH in with SSH student at IP address with the password, and then you control it here. And in this window, you can copy and paste and everything. So that's the way you do it. Anyway, so I can create a chain here, and it's generated one. I called it chain 1. So Multichain is installed. I've created it. Now I can see the parameters, and these are worth taking a look at. This file called params.dat. This is why Multichain is awesome. I originally thought I was going to modify the real Bitcoin, and it turned out to be too difficult. So let me just do less here to see it, or I think I'll do nano. All right. All right, here's the parameters. And I thought this is very nice. You can control how long it is between blocks. By default, it's 15 seconds to make it much snappier than Bitcoin, where it's 10 minutes. You can adjust the maximum block size to be anything you want. So you will not hit the problem of Bitcoin hitting a megabyte and filling up. You can make it whatever you want. You can determine whether new people should be allowed to connect, send, receive, or mine. By default, new people can't do anything, and you have to give them permissions. But you could make it open to whatever you want. I thought this was wonderful. I was actually trying to get the Bitcoin source code modified to make it faster, to make the project more fun, and I found this stuff, which has it all ready to go. And now you've got various other issues like how many of the miners have to agree to change something. You can adjust that threshold, all kinds of good stuff. You can, there's advanced mining parameters and all kinds of stuff here. So you can adjust all these features of your multi-chain. And so here's the ones I thought were fun. You can skip checking whether block hashes demonstrate proof of work. If you leave it true, if you don't skip it, then it will have to work hard to mine blocks. And that makes it more secure, but for a test network, you might not want to. Here's the number of bits of the hash that have to be 0. The more bits that have to be 0, the more work you have to do to mine. So you can set that difficulty at any level you want. You can specify the ports. And here's the interval between changing the difficulty. So that, I think, is 1 day. So it'll wait a whole day and then see if the average is other than every 15 seconds, and then make it harder or easier to keep up with the real difficulty. That's what somebody asked me earlier. What if you fork and aren't very many miners? Well, then after a period of time, it will notice and make it easier. So that one miner can still mine 1 block in the appropriate amount of time. So you can now, this mines the Genesis block. You have no blockchain until you make a Genesis block. This creates a Genesis block, and now the chain is running. All right. Now you can connect to it from elsewhere, and when you do, it'll tell you right here, anybody else can now join. So of course, it's not a blockchain. If you just have one person using a blockchain, it's in no way better than just the old-fashioned database. It might as well just be an ordinary Excel or Access database. You just got one copy of the data, and if that one person decides to cheat on the data, there's no way to stop it. The thing that makes it a blockchain is you have more people that join. So this person joins. Now, they do not create a Genesis block. They connect to the old one, retrieving the parameters, and they will become part of the blockchain. So now they will get a wallet address when it works. Looks like things might not be working here, but anyway, that's the point here. This is the tutorial that came from them. When you successfully join, you will get a wallet address, which is another one of these ridiculous base 58 things. And the rest of this, you create an asset, create another asset, and then you do an atomic transaction, which is a special feature of multi-chain, which prevents double spending. Because one problem with Bitcoin is you can spend a Bitcoin, and then before it gets mined, you can spend it again. And both of those people might fall for it and give you 2 values, you run away and you got the money. And this happens. In fact, you can see it on blockchain.info, how many double spends there are, and it's not 0. It's rare, but it does happen. It's one of the weaknesses of the system. And so to prevent it, Multichain recommends that you make 2 assets and you make an atomic exchange, which is I'll give you 3 of these for one of those, and the whole thing happens at once. I lose 3 and gain 1, you gain 1 and lose, that sort of thing. It totally flips them back and forth at the same time, so there is no opportunity for one transaction to happen and something else to happen before the payment gets through. And that's what happens here. So anyway, I'm not going to dig through it anymore, but this is a lot of fun with the multi-chain. And one application of it is you can make a voting system. So here you make a survey and you can vote, and the votes are on a blockchain and you can see who won. And so that's what you do here. But you end up doing everything with these curl commands, which get kind of long and horrible. Yeah, like this. You end up making a web page which builds these long curl commands that curls, connects to it with a long name and password, and then sends data binary. So it's going to send asset to address token 1. And this is, you build these long things and then execute them with curl. But this way you can make web pages that present, the viewer doesn't know there's, if you end up with a faucet here where you can get money by just clicking this button, it'll give you a token. And the point is, if you want to vote, you get a token, and in the real world, you'd like mail every voter a card with this number on it. That would be their token. And then they use that token once to vote. And then it's gone. And then it goes in the blockchain who got the vote. Anyway, that's the idea. Each candidate has a different address, and you vote by executing a send to address with the right value of 1 token there. And you can make a web page with a button you click to do that. Although here I just had people copying and pasting the commands. So that's the idea. And then everybody has the whole blockchain, so nobody can argue about who won. Everybody can just add it up on their own system. Every political party, every candidate, every angry voter, everybody could have the whole blockchain on their system. And so there wouldn't be any argument about who won, except for the things that aren't in the chain. Like if a voter shows up and lies about who they are, break into your mailbox and steal the card, stuff can happen. Stuff that's not in the mathematics. But the mathematics of vote counting would then be good. That's the idea. Anyway, I think that's enough for tonight. Any questions? I've been asking all along. I don't think anybody's too shy. All right, I'll stop this thing, and I'll go to the lab and help people. We'll continue this next week with more about RSA.